Okay, back on this special edition of Backstory today. I'm John Underwood, and I'm very pleased to be able to have in the studio candidates for the Los Alamitos Unified School District election coming up on November 6th. And across the table from me is a smiling Marlys Davidson. I'm happy you're happy to be here.
My first TV interview.
Is it really?
I've been filmed before, but first TV interview.
Okay. Well, you look striking in red.
Thank you.
As is my wont with all the other candidates, I like to give the candidate the first swing. So I'll ask you the basic question. What makes you, in your mind, uniquely qualified to hold a board position of the Los Alamitos Unified School District?
Okay. Well, I've taught in the district for 25 years and served as a consultant. I grew up in the district. My parents bought their very first home here for $18,000 in Rossmore, so you know that was a while ago. Yeah. I love this community. My husband and I pulled it together to come back and raise our children here because we believe it has a unique quality to it, a community where people care about each other and are deeply engaged and involved. As a teacher for 25 years, I worked in a variety of positions. I worked 3 years at Rossmore, and then when I went to McAuliffe, I did teach 6th, 7th, and 8th and found my home in 8th grade. But through that time, I got to know parents, children. I taught collab classes in which children are mainstreamed who have some learning issues into my class, all the way to gifted programs. So I've seen the whole spectrum of education. I understand how deeply important it is to make connections with parents and students, to care about the individual and to meet every child where he's at. And right now I feel like there's not a strong voice on the board who can truly understand not only the role of a parent and the issues parents have in understanding their child's education, but as the teacher in a 21st century classroom. And so I feel like I bring a different point of view to the board. We have one teacher still on the board, Karen Russell, and she's done a great job.
Is she active teaching?
She hasn't taught in a number of years. And the classrooms of the 21st century have changed deeply. We aren't in rows. We aren't using textbooks nearly as much. It's a very digital age and a very transforming age. We've come up with curriculum that challenges our students with Common Core, and all of it together takes understanding what goes on in the classroom and having a relationship with the teachers. I have, as a teacher on special assignment, worked with everyone from TK to AP at the high school, developing curriculum, working on strategies. I've coached, I've mentored, and I've seen what goes on in every classroom.
Okay, it sounds like what you're talking about, Marlys, is some kind of a disconnection between the board and as it filters down through staff and administration to the student. Is that what you're saying?
I think things have changed, and I don't know if it's because the last new member elected to the board was in 2010. So that's 8 years ago. We have 5 members, and if you total all their years on the board, it's 66 years. So we don't lack experience, but I think a lot of times when people have worked together for so long, things become sort of, they become complacent. We get used to routines. We stop asking questions. And one thing that I noticed in my last 2 years, and I did address it with one board member, is that in the last 2 years of my teaching at McAuliffe, I retired 2 years ago, I didn't have a board member come through my class once. And as a school board member, that's my responsibility. I can't make decisions about how to support and care and love our students and understand what teachers face if I'm not in their classroom, seeing how they teach, listening to what children have to say, trying to understand whether there are connections, whether there are students who need a different kind of support. We need a constant dialogue between our educators and the school board. And I didn't experience it. I'm pretty connected. I was pretty connected.
Well, let's say, well, not even a student. Let's say a teacher has an issue, and they're seeing something developing or coming forward that is not good, is not beneficial to the educational environment, and they want to bring it to the board. Can't they just walk up to a board member and have a conversation, or?
Well, I personally, how can I phrase this? I believe that we were encouraged to go through our own site administration, which makes sense, but also there was not a real clear path to discussion or interaction. So I can give you an example. We've now gone A to G at the high school, where every A to G means that every student will take the classes that will prepare him or her for college. They're college qualifying classes. Well, there were teachers that were finding kids who needed other levels of support before they were ready for those classes, and nobody was listening to them. Nobody asked them when they made changes in the curriculum. They didn't go. If you're sick, you go to a doctor. Okay? If you're going to sell your house, you go to a realtor. If you're going to make changes in curriculum, if you're going to ask that certain classes are eliminated because you don't believe they're needed, you can't do that without asking an educator. The educator understands the impact on curriculum, and he or she understands the impact on the individual students. And when I go back to that whole phrase of meeting a child where you're at, it's fine to set the bar high and say we want all of our students to have the opportunity to take the classes A to G. That's a wonderful bar to set. But you could tell me to run a marathon next week, and I can't do it. I have to train, I have to be prepared. I need to go through the steps that will get me first to the, 5K, 3K, 2K, down the block. We have to meet our students where they are, and therefore we have to be aware of what the teachers have to say, what the teachers' needs are, and listen to parents when they say their children are struggling. So,
yeah, well, that's an interesting point you brought up about kids, not able to jump on the fast track to the college-bound train. We all know that AP scores and are the hat on which the school district hangs its credentials, essentially. It's easy to understand, it's definable, those numbers are easily recognizable as markers of success. But I wonder, and it was very enlightening talking to the previous candidate that came in, Connor.
Student.
And had a very fresh view of what it's like to be a student who maybe wasn't able to jump on that fast track.
And those are the people we need to listen to.
Yeah, he said they got left behind a lot of times. He saw that quite often. Now he's at UCI. He's doing well. He's a music major, but he benefited greatly from his education at Los Alamitos High School. But he said he saw a lot of kids that had nowhere to go, that were essentially square pegs in round holes. They were not. And yet, when I asked him the question about, well, the obvious, there's vocational training and there's trades-minded. He said, well, I don't know what those are, and I don't know. They don't exist anymore. And I was shocked to find that even the automotive training had diminished, if not wiped out entirely. He said it was now a choir hall where they had automotive training. So what's going to happen to these kids? I mean, where do they go?
Well,
if they're enrolled in Los Alamitos High School?
I kind of address that twofold. I feel that some students need they need a safety net. They need more support. They're not quite ready for the rigors of a college prep class. That doesn't mean that they won't go to college. That choice may be down the road. I know there are students who have social emotional issues that are blocking their education, and if we could help those kids, then that could definitely mean they would be on a different track. But we have to know our students. Our ROP program at the high school pretty much consists of sign language, there's emergency medical technician training, fire science, and I think there's one more that I can't, maybe it's a culinary class. And then the way that you can go beyond that is to go through the Orange County ROP program, and you can take a class off campus, and if you set that up, you need to go through your counselor and create a sort of a time management plan. But the ROP classes on our campus, as I understand it, are very limited. What I would really love to see is, and if I make it to this board. I would love to see more partnerships. Los Angeles Unified partnered with NASA. NASA came to them and said, give us your kids that have aptitudes in certain areas but maybe aren't making it academically. Give us those kids, and we are going to match them up with corporations, science labs, JPL, Boeing. We're going to find a place for them, shadowing and being mentored by people. And then they're going to find what they see themselves doing, and we will help work with the school district to set up the educational plan that will get them so that they can graduate and then pursue those kinds of interests. There's so much out there. You don't have to be a doctor or a lawyer or have your own business, and you can be incredibly successful if you find your passion. You have filmmakers here in this room right now. There are jobs out there, but they need to be mentoring. We could have students in here following your filmers right now and learning about how to film an interview. We could partner with the community in a way that would give children a chance to see a future that they could connect with and feel passionate about. That's what I would like to see. We can't build everything on a campus, but we can use this community where people reach out all the time and connect our kids in a way that will help them want to be in school.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So what kind of a STEAM program for, let us say, the underachievers?
Mm-hmm. Yes. And in underachievers, there were a lot of geniuses that were underachievers. There were a lot of very bright people with learning disabilities that struggled in a normal classroom. So yes, for people who are not maybe following the academic track, we have to help them see the good in them. We have to help them see their promise, their future, their talents. Because there are so many kids who are kinesthetic learners. Sitting in a classroom and looking at a book or even doing research is not something that jives with their way of thinking. They're kinesthetic. They want hands-on. The robotics programs, they want to be a part of something that they can handle and touch and feel. And that's the way they learn, and that's the way they create.
Yeah. Does this fall into line with your philosophy, or the philosophy, I should say, of what we now call core?
Common Core?
Common Core, yeah.
So I love Common Cores. I was a teacher on special assignment, which for
most... It's a very misunderstood phrase.
Yeah, I know. So most people don't know what that means. So for half of a day, I was taken out of class to do a variety of things. And the Common Core part of it was I was a facilitator at Oak and McCullough to develop Common Core units in language arts. So I worked with teachers to create these units. And it was just magical because so we say that we have the best teachers, that we have outstanding teachers, and we do, but we need to tap into them as resources for curriculum development, for problem solving on learning issues. Common Core is, I actually had thought about retiring a couple of years earlier and developing this consultant business, and the Common Core, I said, no, I can't. I became so passionate about what we were doing because what you do in language arts is you take a novel and you use it as an anchor to raise greater questions. And then you teach students how to go out and analyze and research and look at all kinds of different perspectives across the curriculum. We can no longer teach subjects in isolation. They are all integrated together. When science makes a discovery, we just have to look at the world. It has an impact.
So this is the essence of Common Core, is the integration of disciplines into the quote-unquote answer?
Yes, and to teach students something that the world needs, an ability to identify an issue, to ask a question, identify a problem, and go out and research the world to see what those answers, how the solutions to those kinds of answers. Yeah. The other part of that is that a big component of what I loved was that we taught our kids how to find valid sources, how to identify, research, studies, the work of a scholar as compared to one of my students cited on one of his papers, Jimmy Z's blog. And I said, okay, Jimmy Z is not really a reliable source. I'm sorry, if he can't even tell us what his last name is, he has very little credibility. So you teach them how to go in and find out what are credible sources. How can we trust what we put into our papers? So Common Core teaches students how to identify a problem, look at multiple perspectives. You have to be able to understand the other side, create counter arguments based on research, and everything you say you need to validate with evidence from the world.
Yeah. In the journalism trade, we call that fact-checking.
Yeah, fact-checking. No fake news.
Okay. So bringing it back down structurally to Los Alamitos Unified School District, who makes those decisions? Who implements Common Core? And has it been implemented appropriately in the Los Alamitos Unified School District?
So for us in language arts, it was the assistant superintendent who now has moved on to another district. I had the highest regard for this man. And then we've had two people since then come in, and they've done a good job. They pretty much cut us loose. They gave us the materials we needed. They gave us time off to develop the units. I think part of what I would have expected from the board, though, because the board is responsible for the books that we choose. They're responsible for the curriculum. They vote it thumbs up, thumbs down. I would have expected more of a discussion, more of a presentation. So you're using Jekyll and Hyde. Explain to us how it's being presented in the class. What's the outside curriculum? Because in the country, there's been a big backlash about Common Core based on the fact there are people who fear teachers are bringing in their own agendas, their own ideas, and their own political or social philosophies. We were really careful about that, and we would have been proud to present our units to the board, but we were never asked to do that. I think they trust the district administration is doing its job, and the district administration says, we did our job, and it's all over.
Okay, but
I don't agree with that. I believe there should be a conversation. I believe I was a TOSA on special assignment, teacher on special assignment, half the day. That's very costly to the district because you have to hire a teacher or work out the class structure so that the classes I would have been teaching are covered. So you can figure $50,000, $60,000 a year for a half-day TOSA. I reported into the district, but I was never once again asked to talk with board members, not in front of the public. I think we should have sat down at a table and they should have said, so Marlys, we've made a major investment in what you're doing. Tell us what you're doing. Tell us how it's improved teaching. Tell us what needs to be done, how we can make it better, if you need more, or if you feel that the program's not working and it's not a good use of taxpayer funds. Nobody asked me that. I would want to know as a board member.
Well, why was there a kind of hands-off approach by the board?
I think they put total trust in the district administration to just tell them everything's working and that's it. Where there are issues, there are concerns, and they never talk to the teachers about it. They have not talked to the teachers. In the spring, the teachers went to the board and just really crying out for a conversation, saying that the decisions to eliminate certain non-A to G classes were never discussed with teachers. The decisions to change the math program to accelerate the pace was never discussed with teachers. The teachers who are brilliant and now have students in a college prep class that are struggling are dealing with a class partially full of people who are ready for the curriculum and then students in the class who are struggling and you have a heart for, but what do you do in a 50-minute period? And they would go for help and they got no help. They were told, well, differentiate the curriculum. Every teacher knows how to differentiate in this district. We are highly skilled, highly talented teachers. That's not the answer.
But we're not all teachers. Can you define differentiate?
Okay, so whereas I might expect from you, an A student, you should be able to write a multi-paragraph argumentation response and use these three sources. I might find this is what you would. I might find three sources that are less complex in text but address the same issue and ask somebody else, I want you to develop an argument and I want it to be one paragraph. Because you meet the students where they are. That's what and see. So, yeah. But if you have six classes. You teach at their level. Yeah, you teach at their level, but you build their skills. Yeah. And these teachers are phenomenal at doing that, but they have a short amount of time to implement a very difficult curriculum. And they have, if they have 5 periods at the high school, we had 6 at McAuliffe, 5 periods times 30 students, that's 150 students in a day that you need to know. You need to meet them where they are at. You need to differentiate, and you need to make sure you're not losing them in the classroom while you're still teaching students who are ready for the curriculum.
Differentiate. Teach them at
the level where they're at. Make sure they're understanding. And there are all kinds of strategies, partnering them with what. And it's not that the teachers aren't willing to do that, but nobody asked if it was wise to take away some of the support classes.
Yeah. I can think of one class where the board was very proactive in, I've come to know recently, and that was a earth science class that was teaching the effects of global warming. And the board took that on and in fact demanded that the teacher explain the class to them before they allowed the curriculum to go forward in the classroom.
So if I'm thinking of what you're thinking of, it's an AP Environmental Studies class.
Yes.
I think that struggle went on in like 2010 or 2011, and so that caused a very powerful reaction from the science teachers, because they wanted, as part of an environmental studies class where you look at the environment and the impact, how it interacts and how it is impacted by humans, global warming or climate change had to be a large component in that. Mm-hmm. Well, what happened was they presented it, and then one board member in particular absolutely Dr. Barkey, and it's published knowledge, said global or climate change is a crock, and that liberal-minded teachers are not going to be brainwashing students. So if you're going to talk about climate change, you need to bring in other perspectives. And they actually put that line into the definition of the class curriculum. It's in the curricular handbook. It had to be in there that not only that you could teach climate change, but you would teach diverse political perspectives. Science is evidence-based, and over 90% of the scientists in the world absolutely say that climate change is heavily impacted by the human footprint. And those who've tried to dispel it, the Koch brothers Foundation funded Dr. Richard Muller. He's a professor, a science professor at Berkeley, highly renowned, but one of the last to buy into climate change. He was funded by Koch brothers to do a 2-year study, basically with the hope of debunking climate change, because this man is highly regarded. He's a MacArthur Fellow, Berkeley, tenured professor. So he set out, he built his own team. It was called Climate Change Project, I think. He built his own team, and over 2 years they researched, studied everything, looked at every angle. And at the end of the 2 years, he came back and said, I was totally wrong. Not only do humans impact climate change, they are the greatest factor. So if you can't even buy the other perspective, we need to go to what a science class is, an environmental studies class is. It's an evidence-based study of the environment, and we have to stop wasting time. We need to create these problem solvers who will look at the research and start to develop answers for us before we self-destruct.
Well, I think what the board said at the time was it was a controversial class. And as a controversial class, they needed to oversee it, at least vet, what the teacher was going to teach, and then provide other opinions as a controversial class. My question today is that still the policy?
It's still the wording in the curricular handbook, because we use the curricular handbook as 8th grade teachers. We go through it with our class as they head towards the high school. We go through it, and it is a sentence in that explanation of the environmental studies. You know what?
So is climate change taught at the Los Alamitos High School now in its science classes as a, quote, controversial issue?
It's taught in the science classes. It's taught in the science classes, and if we are true to that sentence in the description, other points of view are presented. I can easily talk to science teachers and find out, or do they sit in on the class? But the world isn't flat. Thank God they got past debating that, and we aren't the center of the universe. And science is science, and if it's evidence-based, and we know that 90% of scientists don't believe or do believe that climate change is impacted by people, if the vast majority of countries in the world have come together to solve the problem, we're past the debate. We need to be working on solutions.
Okay. Well, I want to bring up in the time that we have left a couple of other solutions that the school district has presented to the taxpayers, and that is Measure G. I'm asking every candidate to weigh in on this topic because it's of great importance to the community. There is a lot of buzz out there about Measure G. And as a reporter, I remember Measure K 10 years ago because I was writing for the News Enterprise at that time. Filed a few stories on it, but seemed like the logical thing to do. Now, less than 10 years later, we're looking at another bond for a little less money. I think it was 126 million, Measure K, 10 years ago.
Now.
And now it's 97. And a significant hit to pocketbooks of particularly new buyers, new homeowners, because it'll come out of your property taxes in the school district. So what's your take on Measure G?
Okay, so first of all, I have to say, I've told everyone I've talked to, and it is my promise, that I will never lie to anybody. And if I don't have an answer, I'll look for it, but I'm never going to not tell you the truth. And the truth about this is that as a teacher, the last bond measure transformed my classroom. It transformed it. It took us from, it's like driving a Conestoga wagon across the country or getting on a jet and flying. I could do things that I never could do before. We had all of the infrastructure, the wiring, the connections. We could bring in tablets for every student. I had a smart board. We could access interactive videos. We could pull up a YouTube clip in 2 seconds. We had, you know, the projectors to be able to do so much. Kids could create presentations that far surpassed anything I'd ever seen in my, you know, earlier teaching. So I truly value what came out of that last bond measure. And we got air conditioning, so I absolutely valued that, especially now since the climate is getting warmer. My problem with it is, and what I feel the problem with the community being against it, is not just the cost to the individual, it's the lack of transparency in our spending over the years. I think there's a basic lack of trust. I don't think people feel that money has been necessarily handled well enough to now take this hit and turn a whole other $97,000 over. What I would say...
97 million.
So 97 million, sorry. We wish it was 97,000. 97 million over to them again. I would say that as a parent and as a teacher, both my husband and I are leaning towards voting for it, but I'm not done listening because I looked at the ballot, the voter guide, and they had all of the reasons, the arguments for it, and there were no arguments against it. There were no people listed as, people you would consider credible sources listed as in opposition. I don't think that's the truth. I think there's lots of opposition out there, and those arguments need to be heard. So I as part of what I'll do in the next month is listen to people.
Well, those arguments are out there, and that's how I'm finding out about it on social media of various types. I see it on Facebook. I see it on in the newspaper papers. I see it in Nextdoor.
I tried to get on that. I tried to get on
there's
that
one gentleman, and I track a little bit of it from time to time, especially recently, and particularly for this interview.
And I'd love to see it.
And he says, he makes the comment, I won't mention his name, but a prominent person in this thread on Nextdoor. When you read the list of projects that was done with the last tax increase versus the one they're proposing now, the last tax increase being Measure K, $126 million, versus the one they're proposing now, Measure G, there are many of the same items, which begs the question, what was done? Where did the money go if we're being asked to modernize and repair and upgrade the same schools again?
So what I would say, what I would say to that is that they need to answer those questions. There needs to be a town meeting where they explain why those things weren't done. Did they go over budget? They're talking about creating a task force or a committee that will oversee. That's if I am on the school board, that committee is not going to be chosen by the board and the district administration. People are going to be able to come out from the community, because I've been on a number of panels and interview situations where I felt like the decisions were already made and everybody at the table was in agreement that maybe I was odd man out. So to answer his question, they need to be accountable. There's lack of transparency in our district. There's lack of conversation. If you go to the board meetings, and I do go to board meetings, they're pretty boring because there very rarely is any public discourse. People don't any longer come to the public forum and ask those questions. Somebody should come to a school board meeting and ask them that, and ask them to answer the question now.
I have a feeling they will begin to.
They will be doing that, yeah. And I'll be sitting in the audience listening.
But here's what happens when you don't have complete transparency, when you're not. I read the ballot. In fact, I have the ballot right here. I have a copy.
It's a little vague too.
Ballot G. Downloaded it because little hard to find, but I unearthed it online from ocvote.com. And truly, it is very vague.
It's vague. And I met with Dr. Kropp and talked with her about this, and she presented a list to me that was more specific than that, which was, when I read the ballot measure, I was a little disappointed that they weren't. But if you're going to pass something legally, it's probably better to be vague, right? But they shouldn't be vague.
Right.
We need to build new classrooms. The temporary buildings are atrocious and probably not safe. So what I would think is that they would be looking at building another second two-story building, and whether you can do it within the constraints of that budget. That would be a high priority. The other one is that our science department is archaic, and we're supposed to be this flagship high school. You would never, if somebody came to tour another district, you would steer them clear of our labs. They are not 21st century technology.
That's what some of the students have told me.
Yeah, it's really sad, because we are claiming STEAM, science, technology. We're putting that at the head of our priority list, and yet we have this science lab that it wouldn't have been addressed 4 years ago or with the last bond. It should have been changed it should have been modernized at that time.
Yeah. Well, I saw the bullet point list that Superintendent Kropp put out, and I couldn't help but notice, it was brought to my attention actually, the last bullet point, which was, after all is said and done, what the cost would be. So $30 to $34 per 100,000 of bond. And then she stops right there. Well, if you complete that calculation, that's
and you have a new home.
Yeah, that's $300 to $400 bump up in your property taxes for somebody.
And I'm not sure. I think we still are paying on the last one.
Yeah.
So it's an accumulated cost.
Yeah.
I'm a little put off by the fact there hasn't been. I went to one town meeting at the high school last spring when they were last year when they were contemplating the bond before they had decided to do it. I had learned about it through a friend at another school. Decent turnout, not a lot of community members. I think that there needs to be a forum in which these questions are asked before people decide one way or another. And I also know that there are people concerned. So we've been through 3. I mean, this is the 3rd. 10 years from now, is there going to be a 4th? They're committing a savings fund to prevent that. But the other issue that I would want to know about the savings fund. What if it comes up and things cost more? Are we going to go into that savings fund? Is it a reality? Is it a confirmed reality that we will be able to see the results of 10 years from now? That will address the issues we might need another bond for, a savings account, a rainy day fund. Are they serious about it? Are they committed to it, or is it just a nice?
Yeah.
And then the other thing is that my other concern is that they have to have some money set aside in the budget, which once again lacks transparency. You get the big numbers and the pages and all of that. So if the bond passes and they have a rainy day fund that they would have used if it didn't, what's that money going to be for? Because over and over again they say this isn't going to be used for any administration salary or anything like that.
Or pensions.
Or pensions, and you can't use bond money for things like that. But if you use bond money to cover one cost, then you free up money somewhere else. We need to be vigilant about the money that money that is somewhere else that has been saved for, so that it's not for salaries, not for pensions, but rather for the classroom. We need every penny to get as close to the students in the classroom as possible. We're going to have someone watching that, and there's been no explanation of spending, as far as I'm concerned, that's gone out to the community.
On January, when everything gets up to speed and you're on that board, should you be voted in, what would be your priorities 1 and 2 and 3?
Well, I think first to create a voice for the community. I've been to the high school and spoke with high school kids who feel that they're not being heard. There's depression, there's anxiety. We wrapped this district in a beautiful bow, and I was so proud to teach here, and I love the people that I work with, and I care deeply about this district, but it's not perfect, and there are kids hurting. Yesterday, I got a card from a mother who had sent a donation to my campaign, and I said, "Oh my gosh, how's your son? How's your son? I loved him." She didn't email me back, she sent me a card and said, "I'm really sorry to tell you, but he took his life this past spring." This is the third one for me. These are bright, beautiful, wonderful, sensitive people. I spoke at one young man's memorial service, and I don't want to do that anymore. If I am on this board, we will not just have roving counselors who are meant to deal with emotional stresses on our campuses. We will create situations, we will give avenues for these kids, places they can go to seek help, because the fellow students are crying out for that. They say, "My friend is anxious, he's depressed, but he doesn't know where to go." We don't have learning specialists.
We don't have counselors that can address that?
We don't have enough counselors. At the middle school at McAuliffe, we have one counselor for 1,300 students and a psychologist. But to qualify to see the psychologist, you have to go through a battery of questions. Teachers have to, identify this, come up with this, do that. I want someone to be there to start dealing with issues of the student who's sitting out in the quad eating lunch by himself. Why aren't we creating like that great, there was a high school on television that had Sit With Me at Lunch Club. Why aren't we getting the students to organize and reach out to one another? Griffins with a Mission was created in 1990, in the mid-90s, in reaction to the spread of anti-Semitic literature in the lockers in the dark of night. The students said, "This is not who we are," and they created Griffins with a Mission, and it became nationally known and a landmark for other schools to come and see how they were dealing with the issues of hate and disrespect and alienation on their own campuses, and how they were helping each other figure out a voice for the students who had no voice. We need to be creating campuses where there are voices. We need to be listening to parents. Parents tell me they have no idea what's going on, and they're deeply involved in PTA and other organizations. So that's my first one, is to be a voice, and not just a voice, the ears. I'm going to listen to what people have to say. I'm going to meet with students, and I don't really care what the protocol is. I'll meet with any parent, any teacher, any administrator who wants to talk with me. We shouldn't be afraid to talk. There shouldn't be anything that we're hiding.
Are you aware that there's a vape epidemic on the campus?
Oh, yes. Yes, the teachers are aware too, and I think they're doing some parent education nights, which I applaud that. I applaud it. We need to educate our students, but we've taken the health class off of our high school campuses because it's not an A to G class, and it gets in the way of this fast-paced move to get through there.
A to G.
A to G, the
Ivy League college bound.
College, or Long Beach State bound, yeah. College bound, four-year college bound. It's not one. It doesn't qualify for that. So I don't know if that's why they took it off campus, if it was just crowding kids' schedules. But our students need to know the health risks that are associated with the choices they're making, and where are we educating them on that? So that's a big part of it, asking why certain classes are removed, how we're addressing the needs of our students, the questions that they have, providing the education, the resources, the comfort, we shouldn't have students who are depressed and anxious, and they're going to exist, but we have to give them resources. And when you have one counselor for 1,300 students, and I talked with a high school counselor who said the ratio is about 1 for 500, and you're in charge of their schedules, you know, every other thing that goes along with being a student in terms of paperwork and everything else, those counselors don't always have time. If you have 1,300 students and you have in a week 5 or 10 serious issues, who's going to handle them? Are you going to fill out the paperwork for the psychologist who's on overload? Our elementary schools and our middle schools have no learning specialists. Your learning specialists are an important resource. I want to know about that. Important resource for teachers, parents. They create the programs that support those students, meet them where they are, and create a safety net to build towards that pursuit of excellence.
Do you mean resource professionals for special needs kids?
No, everybody.
Just everybody.
You know, teachers could go in and say, this student isn't engaged, could there be an issue? My daughter had a form of dyslexia. It was a learning specialist, but she had manufactured her own ways of reading slowly. The learning specialist figured it out for us in 3rd grade. She got some special glasses, and the problem started reversing itself. So we need those resources to help the individual students that we care about. Dr. Barkey said yesterday at the breakfast, we care about every single student. If we do, then we need to find those students that need our help socially and emotionally. We have built all the walls to try and keep out the shooters that we're so scared of. But inside our campuses are students who don't feel safe and connected. And that's a crime. I gave my students at the end of the year, we got business cards. I don't know why teachers have business cards. I gave my business card with my home information on the back of the card every year, the last day of school. And I said to those kids, I will always be here for you. You can call me. I might be old and a little senile, but you can call me at 35 or 40 years of age, and I will do whatever I can to help you. Or if you know someone else. And I had a father pull that card and tell me about his other daughter and ask for help. But I have kids today who are in the business world who open their wallets when they see me and pull the card out. We have to make those connections. We have to let students know we care. That's a big one. The other one is for teachers. We have to stop this revolving door of campus site administrators. We've had 5 principals in 10 years at the high school. Teachers need to be able to understand the programs, ideas, goals, objectives of their leaders, of their administrators. They need to know there needs to be trust built so that the teachers can come to the administrator with any issues or problems or just questions about how to do something better. But when you have a new principal, 5 and 10 years, relationships aren't built. And that's sorely lacking. And I think comes from a lack of leadership at the district. If they can't find people who will stay on a campus longer than 2 or 3 years.
At the district specifically, are you referring to the board or the superintendent?
The board and the administration. I don't understand why they have such a problem keeping administrators. It's either, there was a philosophy a few years back that sort of permeated that level of administration. And it was said to me, because I had taken on some leadership roles, you need to get moving. If you stay in one position more than 3 years, you're killing your career. And that's not the Los Alamitos that I knew. I knew my kid's elementary school principal. She had been there for my nephew, who was 10 years older, when he was a student. People stayed here. Annie Allen, my principal at McCullough, who is now up for teacher, she's the California nominee for Middle School Principal of the Year. She's going to Washington, D.C. She is the most amazing, gifted, talented person. She's the one who would say to us, rush to the student who you see is hurting the most. Rush to that student and say something to that student every single day. She is the kind of voice that we need. She's the kind of person. She stayed here. She didn't pay attention to the 3-year, move with your career. She was offered other jobs. Her connection, her love, her passion was to be principal of McCullough Middle School, and she stayed at that school for 35 years. 35 years. The parents had her. She was everybody's favorite teacher. We're family, and that's the community that we've had. This revolving door of principals, even at the elementary school, is not healthy for a campus.
Okay.
Sorry, Zalila.
Are those your 3
I don't know if I said, oh, so, okay, yeah.
I think we got there. I think we get the point. And certainly it seems to be antithetical to the notion that all students are college bound, or that the vast majority of students ought to be college bound. And you're saying essentially we need to rush to those in need the most.
That's what we need to be doing, is not just those kids, because there are highly successful students we have, highly successful, that are still suffering from anxiety and depression because they never feel they're good enough. I'm taking 5 AP classes. Could I fit 6 in? We have to be conscious of the whole person, and we have to be in contact with parents. Parents need to have a voice in our community. What I would be, as a board member, I will build communication, collaboration, research, and teamwork. That's what I want, not just among the educators, but among the community. That's what I want.
Okay. All right. Well, what we're going to have to do
at
this moment is beg our leave. But it's been a very interesting time and interview with you. I appreciate very much, and I understand now why you were Teacher of the Year in Los Alamitos Unified School District. And they brought you back, reeled you back in as a consultant even after that, and I can see now why. So,
I love my kids.
Yeah, we get that.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, Marlys Davidson, candidate for Los Alamitos Unified School District. Thank you so much for sitting in.
Thank you for the opportunity and getting me through my first interview.
Well,
thank you.
I can't believe it's your first. Yeah. We'll be back again with another interview for candidates for Los Alamitos Unified School District, November 6th election.